All right, I am here and we are ready to go. So we have for you today 30 female yokai. And I watched this video and I was rather impressed with the number of things that were on here. There are some things to keep in mind, though, that there are some major differences in Japan when it comes to things like yokai. So there is what you would call yokai, then there is yude, and then there are urban legends, and then there are short stories. So they vary on like the different types of stories and storytelling within Japan. So we'll start with the first one. What is a yokai? So a yokai is like a monster, and these monsters can take different forms. But the majority of times when you hear about yokai are reoccurring figures that take, and they have like a special trope with them. And usually what a yokai's purpose is to try and get people to behave a specific way in society. So like if you had in essence, and I'm just going to make one up here, if you had a yokai that was the lantern carrier that would accost people in the middle of the night when they were walking alone, then that yokai's like trope, the reason for that yokai was to try and keep people from being alone at night. So if that makes sense. So what we're going to do here now is we're going to take a look at all of the different 30 female yokai that this person here for, what is it, the Mythical Creatures from Japanese Mythology. We're going to take a look at this, and I think this is like, what is it, Wild Mythology is the name of the YouTube channel. So I'm going to go and we're going to look through all these, and I'm going to tell you whether it's a Japanese yokai, a yude, an urban legend, or just a short story. All right, so let's go and take a look. So now remember, if we're looking for yokai, it needs to be something that is constantly reoccurring. It's a reoccurring like apparition. It usually has like a meaning or a trope behind it, something that you're supposed to do for society. Like it teaches you to behave in a specific way in society. And what was it? And there's also other things that can become yokai, or inanimate objects that really become old. And when they become old, they can come to life. Basically, they gain their own magical powers. But so that's what yokai is. So before I start the video, I should probably tell you what a yude is. A yude is usually, in most of the stories, the way yude work, or yude are usually women that have died because of something horrible that happened to them in their life. Whether they were murdered, whether it was just something absolutely horrible that caused their death, and they've come back for revenge. A yude is a revenge spirit. So that's its entire purpose, is just revenge. And then, what is it? After that, you have, what is it, urban legends. And most urban legends, in this case here, are like contemporary. They're not stuff that is like, that has been like passed down from generation to generation. Like the history to them only goes back maybe, I don't know, maybe 50, 60, 70 years. So when we talk about yokai are prevalent throughout like traditional Japanese history. The other thing to keep in mind with like the yokai and yude and different short stories and stuff in Japanese culture is that before the Edo period, which was in the 1600s, before the Edo period, all of these stories were basically, if something bad happens to you, you're going to die. And that's kind of just how it was. After the Edo period, the way these stories were written made it so that, there were ways for you to live throughout the experience or whatnot. Or if something supernatural were to happen, you still have a chance or a possibility of living through the experience by knowing the trope associated with that specific yokai or even yurei. So what we're going to do now, and also with urban legends, there's always a trope to get out of everything, so it's a little bit different. So all right, so let's go and take a look at these real quick here.
Number 1, Utakuchiona. Utakuchiona is the two-mouthed woman, having one mouth located on her face and the other embedded underneath her hair in the back of her skull. The second mouth is a curse that requests large amounts of food from the woman it resides in. If the woman doesn't feed her second mouth, it will continuously scream and cause the woman extreme pain. During meals, the second mouth splits apart the woman's skull, forming lips, teeth, and a long tongue. It then controls the woman's hair, lifting food to its mouth, not allowing the woman to eat anything. Utakuchiona are said to form in numerous ways. In one legend, a woman starves her stepchild while keeping her actual child well fed. The dead stepchild then returns and enters into the evil stepmother, forming the second mouth. The most famous story involving this yokai is about a man who can only afford to feed himself. He then gets married to a woman who doesn't need to eat, only to soon discover that his stores of rice are running out fast. He later discovers that he has married a Futakuchiona, the two-mouthed woman. Number 2.
So the majority of that is basically true. So that basically the Futakuchiona was a yokai that came into being because of something horrible they did in their life. So in this case here, the Futakuchiona did not feed the child in like one of the children or whatnot, and when that child passed away, that child's spirit then entered her body and became this hungry spirit. And in this case here, because of the evil that was done during that person's life, that person became a yokai. So this is also another thing that happens with yokai specifically, is that if you do something bad or evil enough, you can have like an immediate transformation into a yokai based on how much evil you've done. Okay, so let's move on to the next one.
Jorogumo. Jorogumo is the Spider Woman yokai who has the ability to transform between a beautiful woman and a half-spider, half-woman-like creature. Jorogumo can be found pretty much anywhere, but prefers abandoned homes, caves, and forests.
So here's the thing, like the thing is that it appears as a beautiful woman, but the thing is that it's usually like appearing behind a corner, behind a tree, so the person that's viewing it doesn't necessarily see the whole body. What they see is just a female figure, a beautiful female figure that is standing in a specific location.
They're very crafty and cold-hearted yokai with a love for handsome male prey. A Jorogumo's usual hunting method is to transform into a beautiful woman to entrance men looking for love. After they bring the man back into their domain, they web the man up and inject their venom into him over several days, slowly and painfully killing the man. Depending on how much space a Jorogumo has, hundreds of skeletons can decorate the Jorogumo's home.
What they also don't tell you is that it actually eats their innards at the same time too, much like a regular spider. This is a lot like the black widow spider, or different types of spiders that in essence eat the male counterpart. So that's where this comes from as well. This is also a yokai in the sense that and the last one was a yokai as well, but this is a yokai in the sense that you shouldn't be walking in the forest or in abandoned homes or in caves and whatnot by yourself alone. This is a way to push you back to doing what is good within society. So this would be a yokai. So the last one, Futakuchiona, was a yokai. This one also is a yokai because of that.
Number 3, Rokurokubi. Rokurokubi is a yokai that looks completely like a normal woman, except for the fact that her neck can grow to tremendous lengths. When the woman falls asleep, her neck grows and slithers around like a snake, completely independent from the sleeping woman who wakes up the next day without a clue to what her head and neck were doing.
Not true. This is actually, there's a short story written about this, but there's also many different accounts of this entire story here. Basically what happened was a man was married to a woman, did not want to be married to her anymore, and he basically pushed her off a cliff. And then, the vengeful spirit of that person came back, and then the spirit then haunts men in different locations, and while the men are resting, its neck will grow and chase the men around and wrap them up and whatnot. The funny thing about this one here is that it will take, and in the short story about it, it will take, and it took the form of someone that did not look like it would look like before it died, and then it chased the man who killed it off of a cliff, wrapped it up, and threw him from the cliff with its neck. And this is a Rokurokubi, not Rokubi, like the guy was saying. So, but that is the main story where that came from that short story. But there are other renditions of Rokurokubi in other Japanese stories as well too.
During the night, the head and neck will slither around the house, licking oil lamps and sucking the blood of any sleeping human it finds. Rokurokubi are usually formed by a curse caused by an evil misdeed of one of the woman's family members.
See, that's the thing, the misdeed of a family member. So Rokurokubi in the short story went to kill the husband. The husband killed the Rokurokubi by throwing it from a cliff, and then the Rokurokubi retaliated in the form of a yokai to turn and kill the husband. But the Rokurokubi will also suck the blood out of people as well too.
Number 4, Kuchisakeona.
And I know I didn't say this, but Rokurokubi is a yokai, is technically a yokai, even though it is a vengeful spirit. Because the thing is usually the yurei vengeful spirits have a specific person or a specific type of person that they go after. Rokurokubi will just go after pretty much anyone. So next.
Kuchisakeona is the slit-mouthed yokai. Long ago, a beautiful woman cheated on her samurai husband. When he found out, he slit open the sides of her mouth, telling her that no one would ever call her beautiful again. Legends say that she now wanders the streets wearing a surgical mask and carrying a sharp pair of scissors. When she comes upon someone, she asks the individual if they find her beautiful. If they say no, she kills them. If they say yes, she takes off her mask, showing her slitted mouth, and asks again if they find her beautiful. If the individual says no, they get cut in half. If they say yes, she slits their mouth to match hers. The only way to avoid any of the outcomes is to either give her hard candy, which she absolutely adores, or to say that she looks normal when she asks her question. That will confuse her long enough for you to get away. But a piece of advice: never say nothing and run. She's faster than a race car.
So yeah, this is a little wrong. It isn't a this is entirely an urban legend, and there is no historical precedent for it. It was actually something that was developed about, I don't know, between 70, 80 years ago, like 1950s, 1960s, and like the majority of stories behind the Kuchisake Onna is like a woman that's like in a trench coat and whatnot, and she is wearing a surgical mask. I don't think surgical masks were around during the Edo period, or even, what is it, like the Meiji period. So the funny thing about this one here is that this is entirely an urban legend. It's not even a yokai. The funny thing is with this as well is that with Kuchisake Onna, the thing is when she has this, she shows you the slits in her mouth, and she asks you basically, am I pretty, which is kirei desu ka? And what's funny about this is kirei can mean, like beautiful. But there's also a grammatical form in Japanese for kiru, which means to cut. And kirei can mean shall I cut? So she's basically asking you an ambiguous question. And in one, if you say that she's beautiful, the ambiguous part of that is that cut. So that means that she will like chase you and try and stab you and stuff like. So she'll chase you all the way back to your house if you try and run from her. And supposedly, according to the urban legends, she's faster than you. And one way to get around this, like they said candy. I have never heard that in my life. But the one thing that I will say that you can say is not necessarily that she looks normal. It is that you look all right. So in Japanese, it's mama is like the so-so. Hey Jake, how's it going? So that's Kuchisake Onna. So Kuchisake Onna is not a yokai. She is an urban legend. Yeah, long time no talk.
Number 5, Neurona.
This is Nude.
The Neurona are yokai with the body of a snake and the upper torso, head, and arms of a woman. They have forked tongues, slitted eyes, and long, smooth, wet black hair that helps them hide their eyes and scaly body. A Neurona will lurk in the water while only showing her human parts, waiting for men to notice her. Once a man gets close enough to get a closer look at her, the Neurona will wrap her tail around him and then proceed to suck out all of his blood. Sometimes they'll pretend to carry a child in a bundle and act distressed. When a man comes to help her, she'll ask him to hold the child. The man finds out soon that the fake baby gets heavier and heavier until he gets stuck under it and becomes dinner. Number 6.
So this is actually a I don't want to say it's a falsehood, but it's an amalgamation of two separate yokai, and that is a yokai. So the funny thing about it is that the Nude Onna inhabits like swamps and lakes and whatnot. The entire trope behind it is don't go to lakes and swamps and rivers by yourself because you could get hurt and fall in the water. And people in old-time Japan would blame that on Nude Onna, which they would know that probably somebody wasn't necessarily taken by this yokai, but this is how that they would explain it. So the thing is that with this Nude Onna, she would basically pretend to be a beautiful woman in the water, and then when men would jump into the water to catch the beautiful woman, then she would basically make dinner out of them. Is what it was. Now, the baby, the bundle that they're talking about there is actually a different yokai called Umbume. And then Umbume is, what is it? Is it Ubume? Ubume. Yeah, Ubume. Okay, so Ubume, what is it? Is a yokai that supposedly the woman died during childbirth, and basically what ends up happening is that usually this yokai meets you near a bridge of some kind. That's the normal place where she is found. And what'll end up happening is that someone will come by and she'll be holding a crying child, like the child is crying, and she'll ask you to hold the child for her. And as if you accept and you take the child in your hands, you will literally walk, and as you walk, with every step you take, the child gets heavier and the screams from the child get louder and louder. When you turn around to look for the woman, she is gone. And then as you continue to walk with the child gets heavier and heavier and heavier until finally, and bigger and bigger and bigger, until finally you can't hold the child anymore. When you finally have to put the child down and you turn to look and see where she's at, she's gone entirely. And when you turn around to look for the child is gone as well. So this is the the yokai Ubunme. So that's, like I said, the Nure Onna and the Ubunme, this is where this person was basically kind of pushing the two together. So it's not 100% true. Part of what they were saying was true, but the part with the baby, that's a completely different yokai.
6. Yuki-onna. Yuki-onna are known as the Snow Women, and
I've been
are
doing
one of the
great,
most
Jake.
famous and most beautiful yokai from Japan.
How have you been?
Yuki-onnas appear as an extremely beautiful tall woman with silky black hair and perfect pale skin. They usually wear a long white robe or sometimes completely nothing. It's said that when a woman dies in a snowstorm, that they become a Yuki-onna. Yuki-onna are famous for appearing in front of people who get stuck in snowstorms. They either help the people by leading them to shelter or attack them by freezing them solid or absorbing their heat with body contact. A famous legend tells of a Yuki-onna finding a young man and his uncle stuck in a snowstorm. She freezes the uncle but spares the boy because of how handsome he is. She warns him, though, to never tell anyone of her. Years later, the young man marries and has children with a beautiful woman named Yuki. He eventually tells Yuki about the mysterious Snow Woman, only for her to get angry and reveal that she was the Snow Woman all along. Yuki frightens him to look after their children, and then disappears forever. Number 7. Hario Nago.
Oh, that's cool, Jake. Tired after a long day of school and exam talks? Okay, cool. So the Yuki-onna, the story that they were saying there was actually at the very end was the correct story with the young man and his uncle that were woodcutters out in the forest, and the Yuki-onna spared the one guy, married him, had 2 children with him, and then when he told her the story, she disappeared and whatnot from the. Yeah, that's the original story. The only thing is that, like I explained before in a different video, this is a short story, and it was actually written by somebody who was not originally Japanese and actually naturalized in Japan. His name was Lafcadio Hearn, and he was born in Greece. His father was from the UK. His mother was Greek. He went to the UK to be a writer, and then decided to try and go to America to be a writer. And then that didn't work out, so he went to Japan, and then he naturalized in Japan, and then he started writing folklore for Japanese, Japanese like folklore stories. And this is one of his stories. There's another one coming up here as well, but they were written as short stories. So the concept of Yuki-onna is created entirely by this guy named Lafcadio Hearn in the 1850s. So I would consider this more of a short story than a yokai, but some people like to call it a yokai as well, even though it's more of a short story.
Hario Nago are yokai with extremely long and unkempt black hair. At the end of every single strand of hair is a sharp barbed hook. They roam the streets during the night, searching for young single men. Once a Hario Nago finds a man, she'll mockingly laugh at him. If the man dares to laugh back, her hair will come alive and wrap around the man, with hooks sinking deep into his flesh. The Hario Nago will then rip the man into pieces and devour them. The only way to get away is to run as fast as possible and get inside behind a sturdy door. The Hario Nago will disappear in the coming morning, leaving behind hundreds of scratch marks on the door.
So yeah, this one is actually pretty accurate. The what is it, Harionaga, and the what is it? I was gonna say before with the Yukiona. Oh, I just totally blanked on what I was going to say with that. But what I was going to say with this one here is that this one is technically a yokai. And the reason, okay, now I remember the reason why Yukiona is also considered a yokai. Yukiona is considered a yokai because the entire premise behind the first part of the story is to make sure that you know what the weather is doing around you, so you're not caught out in a storm. For Yukiona, for Harionaga, it's basically you should be careful not to just meet people in the street, especially if it's just a beautiful woman. So a lot of these tropes and stuff revolve around like look out for specific kinds of people, and also don't walk alone at night. And if you're being chased, basically just try to lock yourself in your house and keep yourself safe that way. So Jake, can't decide if I should go into a professional school for 2 years or continue going to my current one, then go on to professional school for 1 year. I don't know. It really depends on what you want to do with your life. So, I mean, if you're looking to do like a professional career and whatnot, I would say go to the professional school for 2 years. If you're still kind of undecided, then I would just go with your current one and then go to a professional school after 1 year.
Number 8, Ohaguro Batari. Ohaguro Batari are female yokai that wear a bridal kimono and have nothing but a gaping mouth with black teeth for a face. They're thought to be spirits of dead brides, since blackened teeth were a sign of a married woman back in the day.
Sign of a married woman, but also a sign that someone was royalty, because the people that were able to blacken their teeth were only the people that were at the very top. It wasn't necessarily something you would see anybody below the samurai class doing with their teeth. So this entire bit here is for the upper class only, because the white kimono that Ohaguro Batari is wearing is an extremely expensive piece, and probably would not be something like the majority of people would be able to afford in that time period, and if so, it wouldn't be as elaborate.
They appear at night around temples or in the homes of married men. They love playing tricks by attracting men to walk up to them from behind. The Ohaguro Batari then turns around, scaring the men with their grinning mouths. An amusing story tells of a man being called by his wife. He walks up to her from behind, and right when he is about to embrace her, she turns around, frightened to find an Ohaguro Batari instead of his wife. The female yokai gives him a wide grin and cackles as he runs in fear.
Yep. This is another variation of another Japanese story called Nopperabo, which this doesn't necessarily deal with female yokai, but it basically a story of there's two ways that the story is read, of a monk or a man that walks into a town, and then he's trying to get directions, and the first person he talks to turns around, they don't have a face, they don't have eyes, nose, mouth, nothing. It's just like a clean slate. And then he runs to another person and says, "Hey, did you see that guy over there with no face?" That person turns around and they have no face. And then he goes and tells the local magistrate, and then the magistrate doesn't have a face. The guy runs out of the village like screaming. But the no-faced people are called Nopperabo, which Ohaguro Batari is kind of a similar aspect of that, except for they have a mouth.
Number 9, Eowunden. In Japan, a popular summer activity was the ghost story parties. A party where 100 ghost stories were told, with the least scariest told at the beginning and the scariest at the end. Before the first story was told, 100 blue paper lanterns were lit, and at
Not necessarily paper lanterns. These this actual practice was called what is it? That was it. Hyaku rozoku. It's not Hyakko rozoku. It's one of the 100 candles. 100 candle stories. So hyaku meaning 100 and rozoku meaning candles. And basically you would light all the candles before you would start, and then you would extinguish one by one. They're saying lanterns here, but like the whole thing behind it was because of the candle, not necessarily the lantern. And it didn't necessarily have to be even a blue lantern for this here.
At the end of each story, a lantern would be blown out. According to legend, after the 100th lantern was blown out, a ghost formed from the emotions and fear of the group. Known as Aodan, the ghost takes the appearance of a demonic woman with blue skin, horns, and a sinister grin. She would either slaughter the group or give them a final scare, then disappear. Either way, usually the partygoers would stop after the 99th story, too afraid to continue and chance the arrival of Aodan.
So this is Aoandon. Aoandon is the name of it here. And there is a variation of this here as well, but usually with the 100 candle stories, usually a demon or a different yokai will appear. To the people after the 100th story is told and all lights are extinguished. So there isn't like one left and then this, Aoandon appears. Blue is also usually in Japanese associated with not necessarily evil, but not necessarily bad, but like red is considered like the really good, and blue is considered like, in essence, bad in that case here. So that's where the blue aspect of this character comes from, this Aoandon. And that Ao there means blue. So that's where that comes from.
Number 10, Takaona.
Also,
Takaona are woman yokai
that Aoandon would be a yokai.
who look like normal women but have the ability to grow several meters tall. They spend most of their time around red light districts near brothels. Stories tell of how they enjoy peeping through windows of brothels while people are having sex. Takaona are thought to be women who were too unattractive to marry, as well as those who were consumed and twisted by jealousy from not being able to find work in the red light district.
So this is not necessarily like the way that they're explaining this is actually a little off. In old Japan and whatnot, you could actually sell children and sell family members into brothels. So this could, and like some of the practices and whatnot in those locations weren't necessarily the cleanest and whatnot. So a lot of times where you would have people working there that might have to have multiple abortions, sometimes that could kill the people. So the concept of a yokai coming from like a brothel like atmosphere and whatnot it would not be uncommon. But this is more likely to be a yokai because it's not necessarily attached to a specific person. So if this Takaona was attached to a specific like named samurai that did something horrible to them, then it could possibly appear, and then that would make it a yurei and not a yokai.
Number 11, Tiki.
And that's
Tiki is a vengeful spirit of a young woman who fell onto train tracks and was bisected by the train. Walking on her hands, she roams cities at night looking for her victims. Once she finds someone, she'll chase them down on her hands, dragging her upper torso with her backbone making a scratching tiki-like sound on the ground. She's extremely fast, and once she catches her victim, she'll take a scythe that is tied to her back and cut her prey into two.
When the train like a system like the locomotive system, like the steam engine, steam locomotive system was introduced into Japan. This is where this comes from. So it's not tiki tiki, it's actually pronounced teke teke, and teke teke is the onomatopoeia for the type of like a sharp scraping sound, kind of like like nails dragging on the ground, not necessarily on a chalkboard, but just like dragging over a hard surface. And it's like an alternating like dragging sound. So it isn't like a straight drag, it's kind of like moving back and forth, like it's hitting and bumping along the way. And the thing is like this was kind of like an urban legend that kind of morphed into a yokai at the same time. Basically what it was is a woman that got hit by the trains and whatnot. When trains were first introduced, people weren't necessarily like aware of the dangers that came with trains and whatnot, and it would cause people to get severed in half. And that is where the teke teke comes from, that sort of mindset. So it's, in essence, it can be a modern like urban legend, but it's also kind of a yokai at the same time.
Number 12, Ameona. Ameona are the rain woman yokai. Wherever they walk, rain usually follows. There have been many eyewitness accounts of an Ameona standing in the rain while licking the water in her hand.
Ameona.
While farmers in villages pained with droughts welcome the rain woman, fresh new mothers fear the female yokai. On rainy nights, Ameona wanders villages searching for babies. If they find one, they carry it off so they can turn it into a new rain woman. Sometimes mothers who have had their children stolen are so stricken with grief that they themselves turn into Ameonas. That could be the reason why the rain women are looking to steal babies.
So rain and rainstorms are associated with mourning. As mourning, not as in like the daytime, but actually like grief. So they're more associated with grief than anything. So the act of taking someone's child and causing grief to not only the child, but also the mother, and changing them into this Ameona is the origin of that there. So this is a societal representation, like manifestation of grief is what it is. So this is also a yokai.
Number 13, Dodomeki. Dodomeki were once female pickpocketers who stole one too many times and were cursed. The curse made their arms grow in length, and every time they stole something, a bird eye would then appear on one of their arms. The more accomplished they were, the more eyes they gained. The more eyes they gained, the better their thieving skills grew. More eyes meant they could see new and creative ways to steal.
So this is a thing where like even though nobody saw you, in essence somebody saw you, and like the eyes that are attached across like the arms for the Dodomeki, that is where that comes from. So even though nobody saw you, you can still see yourself doing it, and that's the purpose of the eyes. And the other thing is that like the more grotesque somebody looks like that, with those like eyes and whatnot, the less they're allowed to be in public. So what happens with these here is that this is a slow transformation of somebody going from being human into yokai. So this is a yokai that's supposed to discourage like stealing and whatnot, because of like the disfiguration that you would go through because of it.
Number 14, Honona.
And this is
Honona is a
Honeona. Hone means bone. Hon means book or reality in Japanese.
yokai known as the Bone Woman. They appear as beautiful women to young men and use that beauty to lure these men into bed. After weeks of coupling, the men get weaker and weaker, not realizing that they're actually sleeping with a living skeleton that's sucking out their life force. Onona are formed when a dying woman has a great love for a living man. The woman will die, and then after her flesh is gone, come back reanimated as a skeleton to rejoin her lover at night. This will continue to happen until her lover turns to dust from having his life force stolen, or until the lover in question figures out the truth, in which case he will then ward his home in Honona, causing her to go out into the world to find a new lover.
So this is somewhat true and somewhat not. So what the person is not telling you behind this is that this is not necessarily a hone onna. What they call this hone onna, but the funny thing is that in Japanese culture, ghosts, when they come back, they can come back with corporeal form. So like the body itself is still possibly like buried or even cremated, but when the ghost comes back, they still have a physical form, like a physical form you can still touch. That is a part of like how like the traditional Japanese culture works. Now the thing is that when the ghost comes back, the ghost is undead. The undead, via touch, can steal the life force of the living. So this hone onna that they're talking about here is actually more of just like a regular ghost. And actually, interestingly enough, in some of the old stories and whatnot, ghosts can obviously have lovers like they had in the story here, and they can actually have children that are half ghost. So they're like half human, half ghost, which is really interesting. When I've read a couple of these stories, and the stories themselves are really interesting. But usually when the husband finds out that the wife is a ghost, he usually has to send her away and whatnot, because of the life force stealing aspect. There was one story that I read where the person continued to have the ghost stay, even though the ghost was slowly killing them. So,
Number 15, Sorara Onna. Sorara Onna are icicles that have transformed into beautiful young women. While similar to the Yuki Onna, the Sorara Onna is slightly different. Most stories involving the yokai have her either appear at the door of an old couple or the door of a young man who wished for a wife as beautiful as an icicle hit by the sunlight. In both versions, the Sorara Onna is reluctant to take a bath, but is eventually forced to. When the old couple or man goes to check on her, they find that she has disappeared and that some pieces of ice are slowly melting away in the bath.
yeah, and it's Tsurara Onna. And basically this is a short story. It's not a a yokai. It's a short story about a woman coming and basically melting after being taken in by a family, and that's the end of the story. It's a short story.
Number 16, Hanako.
Hanako. No, it's Hanako. Hana meaning flower and ko meaning child, but the reason why they use Hanako is because Hanako is one of the most common Japanese names for a girl.
Hanako is a modern yokai said to take the form of a young girl with a bobbed haircut and a red dress. She's a spirit that haunts the girls' bathroom of schools. Legend has it that if you go to the toilets on the third floor of a school, knock 3 times on the door of the third stall, and ask if Hanako wants to play, she will appear before you and say yes. Then she will either scream bloody murder or drag you into the toilet of the third stall. Number 17.
Yeah, it's really funny with that when they say the third stall. The main thing is that like depending on the school and whatnot, like it's third stall at the tallest location, but fourth, like the number 4 is more significant as it pertains to death than 3 does. 3 is more of a good number, a life-giving number inside Japanese culture. But 4 means death. So that would be more believable. This is entirely an urban legend. It's not even a yokai. So this is something that's just been around for like God knows how long. I'm honestly just trying to think about how long this actually has been around. It's probably been around for about between 50 to 70 years.
18. Akeshi Baba. Akeshi Baba is a lamp-blowing yokai that resembles an ugly old hag.
And this is Hikeishi Baba. He meaning fire, Keishi meaning extinguish, and Baba meaning old woman or grandma.
While not very dangerous, Akeshi Baba hates light and happy emotions. She enjoys blowing out any candle or lantern she finds, as well as making places and people feel down and dark. She usually teams up with other yokai, blowing out flames to make the surroundings more favorable for the other yokai. Number
what is it? The funny thing about this one here, this Hikeishi Baba, is this is the yokai that explains why candles suddenly go out, or why a fire suddenly goes out with like a gust of wind or whatnot. So like where you would have like physics, like fluid dynamics, or fluid dynamics or aerodynamics, when you open like a door that's been closed and the wind comes in and blows something out. This is what is attributed to that. And this is a yokai, but this yokai is basically like a non-threatening yokai.
Number 18. Kageona. Kageona is the living shadow of a woman. They're easier to see on windows and sliding doors, and are especially easy to find on nights with a full moon. Having a Kageona stick around a house usually means that it's haunted or about to be the home of many other yokai. They're able to move through any substance and are completely silent when they want to be.
Yeah, so this is basically like the entire thing that they said there is entirely true. This is a yokai as well. So like a kage onna might be a shadowy figure that you see in the distance on a road. It can be a shadow that moves like through the forest. It can be a shadow that you see through a window pane or something like that. Or it can be a shadow that you mistake in a house. And that's where this kage onna comes from.
Number 19. Karasu Suma.
All right. So before we get started here, karasu means crow or raven. Tsuma means wife. Remember this for when we start this story.
Karasu Suma is known as the Frog Wife and is involved in an interesting story. There was once a man who loved working on his farm. In fact, he worked so much and so hard that he didn't have time to find a wife. Luckily, a young woman who didn't mind hard work fell in love with him. After 13 years of marriage, the young woman told her husband that she was going to her father's funeral and he was not to follow her. Curious about why he wouldn't be allowed to attend, the husband followed his wife to a rice field. Then she disappeared while a small splash came from the water. After a while of waiting, the man threw a rock into the water and made his way back home. That night, his wife returned apologizing for being out so late. She told her husband that the funeral was postponed because the priest was hit in the head by a rock that fell out of the sky. Realizing that he threw the stone, he told his wife that he followed her. Shaking her head in disappointment, the wife transformed into a frog and disappeared forever.
This is a Japanese short story. This is entirely a Japanese short story, and I'm pretty sure that this person here did not have a name to put with this, so they use that karasu tsuma. This is a frog, which is kaeru in Japanese. So there are many different like short stories like this here. Some of them are very like benign. Others are kind of brutal at the same time. As an example, there's one where a man is sitting down by the river, and there are like two like swans or geese that come swimming by, and he ends up catching one of them and killing them. And so it's a male and female. And he kills one of them, cooks it, and eats it on the riverbank. And then the next day he has like a terrible dream where he has a woman asking him why he killed her husband. And this dream goes on and on. The guy can't get any sleep. And then the next day he goes down to the river again and takes a look, and he sees a lone swan there. And then the swan, like comes up on the land and then like pecks itself until it commits suicide directly in front of him. And then he remembers the day before where he had killed and eaten the male swan. And it is believed that the spirit of the female swan was haunting him in his dreams. This is a very similar kind of story, except for instead of swans, it's frogs. So this is a tie back into Buddhism, where your actions and the suffering that you cause to others can have repercussions to you yourself. So you want to treat nature with respect. You want to basically listen to your loved ones. You want to trust your community, your loved ones, and you also want to treat nature with respect. So in this case here, throwing the rock into the water killed the frog priest, or injured the frog priest, and that was suffering caused by the man who did not listen to his wife when she said, don't go to the funeral. Now, the reason he wanted to go to the funeral is because in Japanese society, when a parent dies, you are to do all the funeral planning and whatnot that goes along with that, including like the wake and all this stuff. It's a 5-day ordeal. This 5-day ordeal includes like hosting the family, making sure like the funeral services are taken care of. There's also like the burial. There's also the prayer aspect through like the Shinto shrines and even temples and whatnot, in which the Buddhist priest will also pray as well. There's an entire ordeal with this. And for the children of the parents that die, or even the in-laws, there's a 5-day period of like intense planning and intense work. And that was the pretense to the story, because the husband in the story is wondering why he doesn't have to do anything as it pertains to the funeral itself. That is very confusing.
Number 20, Katawa Guruma. Katawa Guruma is a naked woman that is connected to...
This is Katawa Guruma. Katawa Guruma. This guy reading these has like a weird inflection. Like the inflection that he's using with the words it makes it sound more like English than it does Japanese, like the Japanese words. So this is Katawa Guruma.
And rides a giant flaming wheel. She goes from town to town along the road looking for sinful souls. Unfortunately, she carries a curse around with her. Anyone who looks at her will be cursed, a curse that can be passed on by gossiping about seeing the Katawa Guruma. While it's not known what exactly the curse does, it's recorded that if the gossiping grows too much in a town, then that town will be entirely destroyed.
Yeah, this is... I've read about this one here, but yeah, it's basically like if you see it, you're cursed, and you have to say nothing, because if you say something, then you are you will cause like curses to other people. What this basically this societally what this tries to instill in people is that if you see something and it's something that's unexplained or possibly a problem, don't gossip and don't tell other people about it. Keep it to yourself so you can, possibly save yourself and others from hardship. And that's the purpose behind it. So like the whole thing when they say like one person is cursed, what they're basically trying to get at is that you need to save others before yourself when it comes to information that you have.
Number 21, Honengame. Honengame are turtle woman yokai. They have the body of a big turtle, a seaweed-like tail, and a woman's head with horns sticking out.
This is actually a really, really old traditional yokai, and they're oracles, but that's called Honengame.
They're very shy yokai and only appear in front of humans to give them prophecies, usually dealing with droughts, pandemics, and other natural disasters.
So there's a lot of different animals and whatnot in Japanese culture, especially those associated with water that predict weather and natural disasters. Another one is catfish. Catfish actually are said to predict earthquakes. So being nice to catfish, not fishing for catfish, or doing your best not to disturb catfish is something that people would do in traditional Japan. So it's likely with this Honengame that the Honengame as well is like an oracle for bad things like mudslides, possibly even like typhoons and other disasters maybe involving like volcanoes and whatnot, as well as drought like they had said before.
Number 22, Kosodate. Kosodate are the ghosts of women who died while they were pregnant. They deliver their child in their graves and then do everything in their power to make sure the child survives. They often try to buy candies and sweets from vendors to bring back to their child. They will also attempt to lead living people to the spot where they were buried so that the child can be found and offered a new home. Once the Kosodate's child is found and cared for, the Kosodate will find peace and move on to the afterlife. Number 23.
So Kosodate, it literally translates as child rearing. So I don't know where they got the name for this one here, but this is not necessarily a yokai. This is probably another short story, but they just didn't have a name of the person to put to it. Because a lot of times, like the short stories themselves don't necessarily have names. They have the characters inside them don't necessarily have names. They just say that this is a they just tell the story without giving the setting of like the people inside of it. They just say like an old man or a woman or whatnot. In this case here, this story that they told is a story in traditional Japanese culture. The thing is that it's not called Kosodate.
3. Kuren Suma. An old story tells of a man named Sachi one day saving a crane from a trap. He then nursed the bird back to health and released it back into the wild. A year later, during a huge blizzard, a young woman named Suma knocked at his door, asking for shelter.
Suma means wife. I don't think there's people that are named, Suma in Japan, if I'm not mistaken.
Sachi let Suma in, and during the 3-day blizzard, the two fell deeply in love. After years of marriage, Suma asked Sachi to get her materials for weaving cloth. And although Sachi was very poor, he loved his wife and got her the materials. Suma then told him that she was going to weave cloth so beautiful that he wouldn't believe his eyes. But she warned him not to come into the other room while she was working. After 3 days and 3 nights, Suma came out of the room with a roll of cloth that was finer than silk. Sachi took the cloth to the market and sold it for a lot of money, which he used to buy goods and more materials. When he returned home, Suma was happy that Sachi was so overjoyed with their new wealth, but she told him that she hoped the money wouldn't change him. Suma made more cloth over the next year, letting Sachi get more and more money. Eventually, though, Sachi locked Suma in the room, forcing her to make more cloth. Curious to see if she was disobeying him, Sachi peeked into the room, only to be shocked. He found Suma transformed into a half-bald crane, combining her own feathers into the cloth to make it better than silk. Staring back at him with tears in her eyes, Suma told him that he had broken his promise to never look inside the room, and that greed had changed him. She then flew out the window, never to be seen again. Number 2.
What they don't say in this story, the story is true. It's not a It's not a yokai. This is a short story as well, and it's a short story. Trying to tell people not to be greedy, which is also a part of Confucianism, which was taught in a lot of the schools during like traditional Japan. What they don't tell you about this story here is that the crane itself was plucking out its own feathers. So it was sewing the cloth and whatnot, but it was actually like pulling out, like literally like physically pulling out its own feathers to make the cloth, and it was using the feathers like in a sense. So like by the time the husband was looking in on the wife, like she had lost a lot of feathers because she was basically plucking herself, and there was like scars and whatnot from the number of feathers that she had to take out to make the cloth that he was then selling. So the whole thing around this is basically don't abuse women to your own, like for your own wealth and gain is the moral behind this one.
24. Ikusui. Ikusui are the vampire yokai that take the form of beautiful women. They usually attack men who are traveling with a lantern at night. They appear out of darkness and flirt with the man as they get closer and closer. Once they get close enough, they'll blow out the lantern and bite into the man's neck, sucking out all his insides until there is nothing left but skin and bones.
So if you look really closely
Number
here,
20.
and if you look over here, this niku means meat, and su here, su-i, this means like to suck or to draw out. So in this case here, like the niku sui means meat sucker. So, and what they're really doing is they're actually like trying to suck out the organs and whatnot, not necessarily just like the blood. So it's a little bit different than a vampire. But again, this is a yokai, and this yokai is from a specific like that has a specific moral to the story, in which don't go walking alone at night.
25. Oiwa. Once there was a ronin named Lemon and his wife Oiwa.
This oiwa,
Who was weak from recently giving birth. Lemon resented Oiwa because they were poor and he thought it was her fault. Next door lived a rich doctor who had a beautiful granddaughter. Lemon was infatuated with the granddaughter, and the doctor liked Lemon, so the two decided to kill Oiwa. The doctor gave Lemon poison to feed Oiwa. Telling Oiwa that the poison was medicine, Oiwa drank it.
This wasn't, well, initially tried to poison her. And then, what is it? And the whole thing is like that. This wasn't a poor guy. This was actually like a samurai that was in love with another woman, and he wanted to get rid of his wife in order to marry somebody else. And what he ended up doing was he ended up trying to poison her. The poison didn't kill her. It made her super weak. So then after she became super weak, he tied her to a doorway, like a door itself, splashed acid on her face, and then sent her down the river.
But instead of killing her, the poison distorted her face, causing her to lose her hair.
Wasn't poison, it was acid.
And her eyes to droop. Seeing her reflection, Oiwa stabbed herself and died while cursing Lemon's name.
She did not stab herself and die. The husband killed her by basically sending her down the river, and she drowned.
On his wedding day with the granddaughter, Lemon went to remove the young woman's veil, only to discover Oiwa's drooping face. Frightened, Lemon took his sword and hacked the spirit's head off, only to discover that he had been tricked and that he had just killed his freshly new wife. Over time, Oiwa did this over and over again, resulting in the death of the doctor and many others. She would come out from the inside of a paper lantern and haunt Lemon for months. Eventually, Lemon was killed by the doctor's grandson for killing his sister and grandfather. But to this very day, Oiwa has not been given peace and still roams the land, forms appearing out of lanterns.
So yeah, and this story with this it's actually a short story. It's written by the same guy that did the Yuki-onna, the Snow Woman, that Lafcadio Hearn. It's the same guy that was born in Greece. His father was from the UK, moved to like UK, then moved to the US, moved to Japan, changed nationality to become Japanese, started writing short stories, wrote the Yuki-onna, the Snow Woman, and also wrote this story called with Oiwa from a series called Kaidan. So this is a short story, and Oiwa is a yurei, not a yokai.
Number 26, Okiku. Okiku was a beautiful servant girl working for a famous samurai. Every day, the samurai would ask Okiku to be his, but she always refused. One day, the samurai hid one of his family's special 10 plates and accused Okiku of losing it, a crime that was punishable with death. Worried, Okiku counted the plates from 1 to 9 over and over again, hoping that there was some mistake. The samurai then told Okiku that he would forgive her if she became his, but once again, Okiku refused. Angry that his plan didn't work, he threw Okiku into a well, killing her. The night after, Okiku returned as a spirit. She would appear in the samurai's home and count the plates from 1 to 9. Once she reached 9, she would let out a screeching scream that terrified the inhabitants of the house. Anyone unlucky enough to hear her counting all the numbers died instantly. Eventually, the exhausted samurai hired a priest who shouted out the number 10 before Okiku could scream after her counting. This caused Okiku to be at peace that the 10th plate was found, allowing her to finally rest. Number 20.
This was also another short story, and because the entire thing was tied to one person that had killed her, the samurai that had killed her, that does not make her a yokai. That makes her a yurei, a vengeful spirit.
27. Aoni. Aoni is a hag yokai with long black hair that lives deep in the mountains. She rarely comes down from the mountains, but when she does, she knocks on doors of family homes, asking for shelter and food.
Just so you know, this is Oni.
For a night. If they agree, Aoni will stay up all night producing high-quality yarn from her mouth for the family. When the family wakes up, they discover that Aoni has disappeared while the bundle of yarn sits beside the door. Number 28.
Yep, this is what is it? This is basically a yokai that does good for people. It doesn't necessarily do bad, but it's all based on the kindness that you've shown to people. So there are hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of Japanese fairy tales that are all revolve around doing something like genuinely nice for somebody without looking to get like a personal gain for yourself, and that causing the family or whatnot to get something nice in return. So basically, do something nice out of the kindness of your heart, you will get something nice in return. This is a common trope that goes over and over in Japanese.
Jakatsu Baba.
Japanese culture.
Jakatsu Baba is a mountain hag that holds a deep hatred for humanity. She carries 2 snakes, one blue and one red. The blue snake breathes ice that freezes anything and everything it touches, while the red snake breathes out fire and turns everything into ash. Number 20.
Yep, this is a what is it, like the witch of the mountains sort of thing. There's many different types of these here. Let's what is it? Ubagi? Is it Ubagabi? Ubagabi? Ubagabi is the one here that is one of these witches of the mountain.
9. Ubagabi. Ubagabi is...
Oh, sorry, not Ubagabi. It was Joken. What is it? Yeah, Jokatsu Baba. That's what it was. Jokatsu Baba.
are floating heads of old women on fire with the ability to travel 4 kilometers instantly as well as breathe fire. These yokai are formed when an old woman gets caught stealing oil and then dies from shame. Legend says that if these yokai bump into you,
So yeah, this is stealing oil was one of those things that the reason why they die in shame is because stealing oil was like a necessity when you lived in like a cold region of Japan. So when you were trying to steal oil, that means that you were so poor that most people would just give you the oil that you needed to stay warm. So going in and stealing it, it was shameful. There was shame in actually stealing from people, but it was more shameful to steal something that was like a necessity that people might be willing to just give you to keep you warm. And that's where this comes from.
then you will mysteriously die within the next 3 years. The only way to stop this yokai before it hits you is to shout out "oil robber," which will cause it to disappear. And finally, number 30, Yama-uba. Yama-uba are the old crone-looking witches that...
And this is not necessarily Yama-uba. What this is Yamamba.
...inhabit the Japanese mountains. They love the taste of children, but hate eating the elderly. They often use their powerful magic to disguise themselves into beautiful women and make powerful magical items. One story tells of a young girl getting lost in the mountains. She happens upon a witch's home who luckily comes to care for the girl. The witch gives the girl a magical cloak that will disguise her as an old woman. The witch...
And this is this Yama-uba? This is not Yama-uba. This is Baba Oni. This section of the story where they're talking about a woman that goes to see this old woman in like what is it, in a house in the middle of like the forest. The what is it, Baba Oni takes and makes her a beautiful coat that she puts on, and it changes her into an old woman. So it's not that she it forces her to be changed into an old woman.
Then tells the girl the way back home, but warns her to keep the cloak on so that the other Yama-uba will ignore her. Luckily,
No. So here's the thing. She puts the cloak on, and then she finds out that she can't take it off. Like there's a magical attachment to it that doesn't allow her to take it off. So she looks like an old woman. And she goes back to town, and then she's this young woman that's looking to get married, but she can't find anybody that wants to marry her because she looks like an old woman. So finally she meets a man who is a kind man, and that kind man basically takes care of her as an old woman. And then one day the cloak falls off because the man loves the older woman and whatnot. And then he finds out that she's a young woman because the cloak comes off, and then they get married and have children.
for the young girl.
But that is Baba Oni, not Yamamba. Or Yama-uba, as they're calling it here.
The cloak works, and she finds her way home. And there...
So, as you can see, some of the stories that they had in here were actually pretty good. Some of them were not as good, and some of them it looked like they were actually just making up the name. So while I really enjoyed watching this and whatnot and commenting on it, there were a lot of things in there that were specifically yokai, others that were yurei, and others that were urban legends, and others that just came from short stories. So I would say that if you're going to be looking for this stuff, make sure that you know what you're looking at, because all of these were not all yokai, only some of them were. So I'm going to leave you here, but I want to say thank you for coming and watching the stream, and I will talk to you later. Take care. Bye-bye.